The guy from Tennessee. It is great to be here. I am, of course, as you heard, from MSNBC, the official network of the Republican Party. Reverend Al sends his best to all of you. A couple of others would, but they are no longer with our network. It's always an honor to be here, a great honor to even walk on these grounds. You really do, as somebody that was inspired to get into public service because of Ronald Reagan, you just, if you're in my position, you feel unworthy certainly to be up here to walk on the grounds. I felt that way this past spring when we went to Eureka and I delivered the commencement address. And before I did that, I talked to a lot of my friends who had actually worked with Ronald Reagan and knew Ronald Reagan and said, what in the world do you say? At a commencement address at a place like Eureka College. And I asked Craig Shirley, who of course is probably writing a Reagan biography right now and will be done by sunrise tomorrow morning. He's written like about 47 of them and they're all great. Craig said, talk about Reagan's character. And I asked Pat Buchanan, a good friend of ours, what we should talk about. And he, of course, Pat, I love Pat. He's a cheerful Irishman, but he can be gloomy sometimes when he looks at the future. And Pat said, talk, Joe, about the rising clouds over Western civilization. And Reagan, the ones that Reagan saw and the ones that he was able to protect us from. And then I asked Peggy Noonan, I said, Peggy, what should I tell these college students? She said, I'm not sure what you tell them, Joe, but always remember, you were the only person standing between them and a glass of beer. So make it fast, Buster. And Peggy, as always, had it right. I'm going to try to do that tonight because I'm really interested in your questions. And you heard more about the book in the introduction than I'll tell you in this speech. I do want to say, though, a couple of things that's frustrated me about my party. We've lost 5 out of the last 6 elections, and we've lost 5 out of the 6 elections not for the reasons that the mainstream media said we lost 5 out of the last 6 elections, because they will tell you that the Republican Party has been too conservative, that we've been too extreme, that we've been right-wing lunatics. That's not been the case in the presidential nominees that we've put forward in the general election. Mitt Romney, not a raging right-winger. John McCain, also not an extremist on the far right. The problem I've long believed has been that we haven't followed the model of Ronald Reagan. We haven't gotten people who are conservative to their core ideologically, but moderate temperamentally. That is so absolutely critical. Ronald Reagan, in David Stockman's book, told some staff members that were coming to him asking for yet another round of cuts. He was saying, I just don't think the American people are ready for yet another round of cuts, and reminded them, I don't wear the black hat. We've got to always make sure that we connect our conservatism with the core of middle America. That's what we've forgotten to do in this country. And we've just assumed because Ronald Reagan won 49 states and made it look easy, that it is easy. It's not. We can't just go out and repeat the same tired lines that worked for me in 1994, in 1996, in 1998, and 2000. And that worked for Ronald Reagan in 1980 and 1984. We've got to seize upon that conservative ideology that worked then and connect it to the truths that lie before us right now. And the fact of the matter is, we live in a country that since 1973 has seen the average wage for Americans go down. We live in a country where manufacturing jobs have left, but in a country where they can come back. And we live in a country that has we've gone from a bipolar world to a unipolar world to a multipolar world. The economy is struggling right now. And it struggled under Barack Obama for all the reasons that I said it would struggle under Barack Obama. But we struggled under George W. Bush too. We've got to understand again that if we're going to win again, our conservative message has to be relevant to all Americans. Now, I'm going to say something that, I hope my mom's not watching this streaming live because it makes her very upset whenever I'm critical of my party. But I've got to say this, Mom, I'm really sorry. Maybe you should go get some cereal and come back in about 5 minutes. Because I'm going to talk about Mitt. You love Mitt. I'm going to talk about Mitt Romney. Now, I like Mitt Romney. I think he's got a great family. But you know what? At the end of the day, Mitt Romney couldn't connect with middle Americans because he really did believe about the 47%. He not only said it during the campaign, he said it the morning after the campaign. We conservatives, if we're going to win again, and when we win again, win the presidency back, I want to win 49 states, just like Reagan. We've got to make sure that we nominate candidates who believe that freedom and less taxes and less regulations and more opportunity is just as relevant to an 18-year-old Latino starting his career in South Central LA as it is a 65-year-old hedge funder in Greenwich, Connecticut. Ronald Reagan believed that. He believed in the American dream because he lived the American dream. Margaret Thatcher understood as a shopkeeper's daughter that conservatism wasn't some distant philosophy lectured about in the halls of Oxford. That conservatism, that free markets, that lower taxes, that less regulation, that more freedom made the difference between her father's business succeeding and her father's business failing. And she took that message to a country that was moving us in a socialist direction. And in 1979, she started a revolution in Great Britain that Ronald Reagan started a year later in the United States of America. And it made a huge difference. They bent history, and we can bend history again. And again, it's not about meeting in the mushy middle ideologically. It's about being conservative ideologically and moderate temperamentally. And we can do it again. When I got elected in Northwest Florida, I don't know how many of you have been to Northwest Florida. It's also called the Redneck Riviera, right? We call it LA too. Lower Alabama, America's Albania. There are a lot of different words for it. But when I ran in 1994, I was the first Republican elected there since 1873. And they hung the last one that they sent up there. It was an uphill battle. It was an uphill battle. I remember telling my father, Mom, I hope you're back because you'll remember this. I remember telling my father that I was going to run against a 16-term incumbent named Earl Hutto. Good old Earl had been in office for 16 years, and he dominated the district. But I told my mom and dad that I wanted to go to Washington and I wanted to make a difference. And I remember them staring at me. I thought they'd be very proud, by the way. I mean, they're so conservative, they still think Nixon was framed. Some of you do too, don't you? That doesn't get as big of a laugh here as it gets in most places. I saw a couple people in the back going, yeah, he was framed. What's your point? All right, so my parents agree with you. Nixon was framed. I thought they would be excited because I was going to Washington to stop Bill Clinton in his tracks. The guy drove me crazy. I feel your pain. He's lying. You know he's lying. I'd point at the TV and I'd be angry. So I said to my mom and dad, I said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to Washington and I'm going to beat Earl Hutto. And my father said, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life, he said, well, that's great, Joey, but I'm voting for Earl. I turned to my mom, I was like, Ma, help me. She's like, I'll vote for you. Weeping the entire way. But she did vote for me, and I found out that year that you didn't need your father's vote to get elected. You just had to believe in the lift of the conservative dream, that you could fight for more freedom, you could fight for less taxes, you could fight to make conservatism relevant in 1994 like it was in 1980, and you could get elected. And we did get elected. But see, here's the second part of that story. Bill Clinton drove me crazy, all right? And the problem is that once I went to Washington, D.C., what's the first thing you have to do? You got to meet the president, right? You've got to receive it. I said, I'm not going to do it. I can't stand him. I'm not going to do it. They said, you got to meet him. So there I am. I'm walking in, and I said, I can't believe it. Walking into the East Room, and I stopped and saw him. There he was. How many of you, by the way, have met Bill Clinton? Anybody? Okay, you all are a good Republican crowd. Because let me tell you, only one person raised their hand, and that's the way it should be. But most places where I go to speak and I ask how many people have met Bill Clinton, half the room raise their hands. The guy's like a Beach Boys song. He gets around. He's everywhere. Everybody seems to have met Bill Clinton. Well, the first time you meet him, you look at him, and the guy looks like he's like 8'3". The next time you meet him, he looks like he's like 7'2". The third time, you're like, got a couple inches on this guy. But the first time I met him, just looked big, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm glaring, and he's looking, he goes, hey, it's Joe Scarborough. I turned around to my wife, and I was like, he knows my name. The president knows my name. And he came over, and he was giving me the full Clinton, you know, his hands are all over you. It sure is great to meet. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. He just loves hugging me. Just grabbing me. And my friends, I confess to you, I was seduced. It was terrible. They came over and they took pictures of me, and I was smiling fresh off the farm. And by the time I came to, I had 4 primary opponents later that night in Pensacola, Florida. I went home later that night, though, I want you to know. And I came to my senses, and I was washing my hands, trying to get the stain out like Lady Macbeth, but it wouldn't come. The next week on the Capitol, I saw my good friend Erskine Bowles, who was the president's chief of staff at the time. He goes, how are you doing, Congressman? I said, I'm doing good, Erskine, but I got to admit it, I love you, man, but I can't stand your boss. And Erskine said, that's all right, Congressman. He hates you too. And he did. So did Hillary. They all did. But what happened? What happened in the 1990s? We had a Republican Congress that couldn't stand a Democratic president. We had a Democratic president that couldn't stand a Republican Congress. What did we do? We balanced the budget for the first time in a generation. We balanced it 4 years in a row for the first time since the 1920s. We passed welfare reform. We cut the capital gains tax. We cut the death tax. We passed real regulatory reform. We made a difference, and the most important thing is we get out of the way and we let small business owners create over 20 million jobs for this economy. And we did it together, yes, together, with Democrats and Republicans figuring out a way to move forward. You know, in the 1980s, a guy named Ronald Reagan worked with a guy named Tip O'Neill. Now, I understand, and you start talking about this, it drives Craig Shirley crazy. They didn't like each other. It's not true. I'm talking to you, Craig. It is true. They couldn't stand each other's ideology. In fact, Tip O'Neill's son said the only thing that Dad hated more than Ronald Reagan's philosophy was gridlock in Washington, D.C. And the only thing that Ronald Reagan hated more than my dad's philosophy was getting nothing done. So they had a rule. It's a simple rule, and it's a rule that we as a Republican Party need to remember. That you always put your country first, even ahead of your political party, even ahead of your political base that sometimes doesn't understand that people in Washington can actually disagree and still get things done. One of my favorite stories about Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill was written in Richard Reeves' book. And it was after Beirut. The chapter in Ronald Reagan's presidency that, if the president could take one thing back, take one day back, Pat Buchanan said he told him that would be the day. That it was his worst day as president when over 240 Marines were killed in the Beirut barracks bombing. But Reagan and O'Neill had a rule that after 6 o'clock, they stopped being political enemies and started being friends. And Chris Matthews has written a good book, Chris worked for Tip O'Neill, that really repeated a lot of the things that Richard Reeves said. That these two men would fight during the day, and then at night sometimes Tip would get into his car and go down to the White House, and they would do what two Irish politicians have been doing for years. You know what I'm going to say. You're wearing green. You probably drank a lot of whiskey before you came over here. That's why you're laughing so much. Look at her. She can't control. Yes, thumbs up for whiskey. Okay. They know that drink whiskey. That tell tall tales. That tell jokes. That talk about their families. And they would build a friendship. So even in the worst of times, they could pick up the phone and they could call each other and they could put their country ahead of their political differences. So in the morning, the call came in that over 240 Marines had been killed in Beirut. Tip O'Neill called an emergency meeting and got all the Democrats together. And as they went in, most of them thought that O'Neill was going to be giving him strategy on how to take political advantage of this disaster that most Democrats had warned about. But O'Neill surprised them that morning and said, today we're not Democrats. Today we're Americans. And if any of you go out and speak ill of the President of the United States in this time of crisis, you won't have Ronnie Reagan to answer to. You'll have Tip O'Neill. And guess what? That's back when speakers were speakers. Everybody kept their mouths shut. And then Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill spoke a few weeks later, and they decided the debate should start. And it did. Now, I don't think any Democrat would say that Tip O'Neill compromised his values or his beliefs. And certainly nobody would suggest that when Ronald Reagan figured out a way to work with Tip O'Neill, that somehow Ronald Reagan was a great compromiser of his beliefs. Instead, they worked together for the betterment of this country. We can do it again as a country. But we've got to get past, unfortunately, the mindset that both parties in Washington, D.C. have been stuck on for so long now. And we've got to move forward. And as conservatives, we've got to present a positive vision of where this country can go. And I think we'll do it. I'm very, very optimistic, and I believe that, in not only in 2014, but I think in 2016, you're going to see a renewed Republican Party that's going to step forward, and I think prepare for this. I think this country's next great surge forward. I think we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic in the 21st century. And it's the Republican Party's, I think it's the Republican Party's responsibility, and I think it's our destiny to start winning elections again and really guide this country to an economic renaissance. You know, Dwight Eisenhower, I talk about Eisenhower a little bit in this book. Dwight Eisenhower in 1957 was faced with the challenge of Sputnik. What did Ike do? He didn't threaten the Soviets. Instead, he said, we're going to invest in a new generation of mathematicians, of scientists, and of engineers. And so he made an investment, just like he had made an investment in the interstate system. And because of that investment, 4 years later, JFK was able to say, by the end of the decade, we're going to send a man to the moon. Did you know on the night that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon in July of 1969, do you know how old the average worker was in mission control? 28 years old. 28 years old. And it's not like that story ended there. Those engineers and those scientists and those mathematicians, after they left NASA, they helped create an economic explosion and helped create and invent things, with all due respect to Al Gore, like the internet, and created explosive growth that we still benefit from today. And I think that's what's going to happen over the next generation. We've just got to start winning elections again, right? Just like Alabama, when they get a chance to kick a field goal on the 15-yard line, they need to kick a field goal and take the win. And with that, I'll be glad to take your questions. Except for you two. Are you two all right? Can you all handle a microphone? Oh, is that a yes? No? Okay, we'll keep the microphone away.
So we do have microphones. If you would please, if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone, because we are live streaming and we need you to be on the microphone in order to be heard. It's right here.
I have a question about John Boehner announcing today that the Republican Party has to remove or clear certain elements in the party. How do you feel about that? Do you think that will come about?
Let me tell you something. When you've lost 5 out of 6 presidential elections, you need all hands on deck. You really do. I think one of the most fascinating things is, after we had our elections a couple of months ago, the 2013 elections, Chris Christie won in New Jersey. Very impressive win. Ken Cuccinelli lost. And the next day, everybody was talking about which wing of the party won. Okay, are we going to be the Christie wing or are we going to be the Cuccinelli wing? No. We're going to be both wings, right? Let me tell you something. People love coming up to me and saying, that aren't Republicans, that aren't conservatives, they love saying, oh, this Tea Party, they're crazy. You know, it's never been that bad. They've never been so radical before. You know what they said when I got elected? They said, you're crazy. You're bad. Republicans, they didn't used to be radical like you guys. You all are so tough on the president. I mean, the same thing that they're saying about the Tea Party now, they were saying about us in 1994. I haven't changed ideologically. Maybe I've gotten a little older. You know, maybe I've figured out how to get along with the other side a little bit better. But I'm still just as conservative. And I know this, that the reason I won, the reason why I was the first Republican elected in my district since 1873, is because the very people that some would like us to drum out of the party now were the people that knocked on doors for me, were the people that made the phone calls, were the people that stuffed the mailers and licked the stamps. You want to lick thousands of stamps? It's not a lot of fun. You've got to believe. And you know what? They were called Reagan Democrats in the 80s, in the 90s. A lot of them were Perot United We Stand types. And now they're the Tea Partiers. We have to have that energy if we want to take back the White House in 2016. And I say this too. We also have to get a candidate, don't boo me, that can get the vote of both Ted Cruz and Colin Powell. And don't tell me that it can't happen, because it can. You know what? Ronald Reagan could do it. I told you, you shouldn't. I told you not to, don't do that. You're being too negative. You got to believe, my man. You've got to be optimistic. I did say Colin Powell. No, no, Joe, it's just a terrible American Colin Powell. Wrong. Let me tell you something. Whenever I say this, and I say this as a challenge, people go, Colin Powell? Who would want him in our party? He voted for a Democrat twice. Well, of course he did. So did a lot of other people. We want them back on our sides. We want them back on our side. We want people that voted for Democrats 5 out of the last 6 elections to vote for Republicans 5 out of the next 6 elections. Now listen, this depends though. And this is what my book's about. If you want to feel comfortable in your ideology, I'm not talking about you, sir. I've been preaching, no, I'm serious. I've been saying this for some time. This is the great challenge of this book. And what I'm saying, if you want to be comfortable in your ideology, if you want to just feel superior to everybody else, if you want the Republican Party to be a club, if you want to exclude people that don't believe just like you and I believe, if you don't want to push the boundary and figure out how to drag them over to our side kicking and screaming, you're not going to like this book. I remember when I ran in '94, people told me there was no way I could win. I was 29 years old. I had no money. I had no name ID. I didn't know anybody in politics. It was a Democratic district. They had not, like I said, voted for a Republican in over a century. People said, you can't win, Joe. How can you win? You know what I said? I said, I can win because I'm going to will this win. I don't care whether the voters want to elect me or not. They have no choice. And I went out knocking on thousands and thousands of doors. We built a grassroots campaign, and I won by 62%. And the next time I won by 73%. And the next time I ran unopposed. And the last time I won by 80%. But you know how I did that? I did it by getting a lot of Democrats voting for me who thought I was a little crazy. And I heard it all the time. They said, Scarborough, you know what? You're a little crazy. You're a little too conservative. But we trust you. And we think when you go to Washington, D.C., you're going to do what you think is best for this country, and you're going to do what you think is best for our district. We've got to go after those voters that aren't comfortable with us on every ideological position and that we're not comfortable with. But we can do it. Now let's talk about Colin Powell for a second, since I brought him up. And since he served this president honorably, that we're here, that every day you all are here. What's that? And he's a great American. And he's a great general. Read my book. And at the end of that book, see what Colin Powell says about free enterprise and free markets. And you know what? He sounds a lot like Ronald Reagan to me. See what he says about education reform. And when you do, guess what? He sounds a lot like Ronald Reagan to me. And then see what he says about what U.S. foreign policy should be. I will guarantee you, it's not the type of U.S. foreign policy that we have seen Republicans running over the past decade. It's tough realism, practiced like Ronald Reagan. Now listen, there are a lot of things with Colin Powell that I disagree with. A lot of things. But guess what? We're not going to be able to have everybody that's out there voting that's going to agree with us on every single issue. So we'll see. You may be right. And if you're right, we'll lose 5 out of the next 6 elections. If I'm right, we're all going to the White House and having a party in 2016, okay? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you want Hillary to win, but I'm joking. Another question, I promise this will just be a yes or no. That's a lie. I actually have got a 3-hour show. I'm just starting.
We have one,
Yes,
we have one right here first.
Oh,
I changed my mind.
you changed your mind. The
Yep.
whiskey gave you courage. Go ahead, ma'am.
Since I really believe the problem is on both sides of the aisle, which both Republican and Democratic politicians do you see that have a moderate temperament now?
You know, it's very interesting. I was invited to speak to the Republican Governors Association a couple of weeks ago. And what I found was that the problem with the Republican Party that I see is a Washington-based problem. You talk to the Republican governors, whether you're talking to Nikki Haley, who is a Tea Party Republican, or whether you're talking to John Kasich, who I believe is a Main Street Republican, and another guy that inspired me to get into office. And you see a lot of governors that have a moderate temperament. As Nikki Haley said to me, if you're a governor, you can't afford to shut down the government. You've got to figure out how to work with Democrats. You've got to figure out how to talk to people on the other side of the aisle. But who has a moderate temperament? I'll tell you, I like Scott Walker's temperament an awful lot. And you know what? There we go. So a little more applause for Scott Walker than Colin Powell. But we're working on it. We're working on it. We're gonna But let me tell you what I like about Scott Walker so much. Scott got elected. I knew him before he got elected, met him, and I liked him. Quiet, unassuming guy. And he went to Wisconsin and went back to Wisconsin after he got elected. And he got in a horrible fight with the unions, just like Chris Christie got in a horrible fight with the unions. And it turned into a political bloodbath. And I wasn't critical of Scott on the show, but I said, I don't know that this is the way you start your governorship. That you can talk about numbers, you can talk about pensions, you can talk about math, but if you take on that and ending collective bargaining at the same time, you're going to create an ideological firestorm. And that's exactly what happened. So we got Scott back on the show. And this was after the big fight, and he won the fight. So I thought he might be taking a victory lap. I said, Scott, what did you learn from this episode? And he said, Joe, you know what I learned? I learned that I should have listened before I talked. I should have gone around the state listening a lot more and talking a lot less. I shouldn't have been so arrogant. I should have listened to the voters and then crafted a solution based on what I heard. I thought that showed an extraordinary temperament because he wasn't saying this after a political loss. He was saying this after he won. After the unions across the nation took him on and tried to break him in two. And he still had the graciousness, and I thought he still had the temperament to say, you know what, I learned a valuable lesson, I'm going to move it forward. That's why I think he won the recount, why he's going to win re-election, why I think if he runs in 2016, I think like all of you, I'm going to be cheering him on. I hope he does a good job.
Okay, right here.
I just wanted to make a comment. The things that you're saying, I mean, make a lot of sense.
Really,
make a lot of sense.
I'm going to give you my mother's phone number, and you can call her. And maybe Mary Jo Scarborough will start to think that her son gets something right once in a while.
Well, in that what's going on currently, it's not working. And
Right.
you know yourself doing the same thing over and over again and
Right.
expecting different results. It's insanity. It's not happening. I remember Abraham Lincoln saying, I destroy my enemies. I make them my friends.
Right.
And I mean, very, very powerful. And it sounds like to me, this is the road or the direction in which you're talking about moving towards.
Well, you know what? You're exactly right. Another guy talked about winning friends and influencing people. But I was just, speaking of Craig Shirley, I was having a talk with Craig Shirley this morning about a politician who will remain nameless, who sometimes would not be so gracious in victory. And I was saying, well, after I win, the first thing I always did is I'd call up the person I defeated. And I would say, listen, I'm not as smart as you. I got lucky. And maybe part of that's true. But I said, you should have won this thing. You're smarter than I am. You're better looking than I am. And everybody knows that's true. So it's not like false modesty. And I need your help. Could I come over and talk to you? That's the first thing. I always did that. And you know what? It always paid off. And speaking of my mom, it drove my mom crazy. She said, these people tried to destroy you. And I said, okay, let's make sure the next time they don't try to destroy me again. And I had the woman I ran against in the Republican primary, my first race, kept attacking me. I played music. I played in a rock band. And she had the screaming headline, do you want, a rock star as your congressman? And I actually wrote her a thank you note because nobody ever called me a rock star. I'd been trying to be a rock star my entire life. Bought guitars from the time I was 13. But I wrote her a note, thanked her for that. But the campaign got really nasty. And my mom couldn't understand. And everybody who supported me couldn't understand why I appointed her to a commission that everybody that supported me had wanted to be on. And some of them thought I betrayed them. And I said, no, we've got to bring both sides of the party together. And we did. I didn't have a serious opponent again in my 4 terms in Congress. And we've got to figure out how to be a little more gracious as a party. We've got to be a little less opportunistic. We've got to worry a little bit less about sounding good on talk radio. If Paul Ryan passes a budget, I'm not naming any names, but we probably shouldn't say it's the end of the American dream. I don't think Paul Ryan will lead us astray. But we had people saying that. I mean, how many times can we go out and say, today, freedom died? I've heard that 1,000 times. Good Lord. How many times can you drive a stake through the heart of freedom? We need to stop being so dramatic. You hear it all the time. And that's another, I got to say, it's another, we've got to be more optimistic. Not only about our party, but about our country. I'm sick and tired of hearing that Barack Obama is going to destroy America. It reminds me, speaking of Ronald Reagan, this great president, I remember I got a call. I went to the University of Alabama, wasn't that great of a student, and I got a call down to the dean's office, and that always scared me, because any time as a student I got called to the office, it was bad news. But this time I got called down because the dean of the history department said, I don't know if Joe, you've been here for 3 years and you've made all A's. We're going to give you an academic scholarship. After he woke me up off the floor because I fainted, he took me out to lunch. And we were sitting over lunch. And I was trying to make conversation. I was nervous. And so I just blurted out. I said, what do you think of Ronald Reagan? I mean, Reagan was my hero. And this dean, who I had great respect for, stopped and thought for a second. And he said, you know what? I think America is strong enough to even survive 2 terms of Ronald Reagan. Now, I was shocked. I didn't understand it at first. It's like, what? I really didn't. I didn't comprehend it. But by the time it sunk in, I thought, wow, isn't it amazing that 2 people can have views that are so diametrically opposed? And I bring up this story only because there are a lot of people who still believe that Barack Obama represents hope and change for this country. I don't know why. I sit next to a woman 3 hours a day on my TV show that still believes that. By the way, Mika wishes she could be here tonight. She really does. Her daughter, though, is going to find out today whether she got accepted to early admission to Johns Hopkins, and she did, so congratulations to Amelia. But you know, we need to stop going around saying that Barack Obama is going to destroy America. And before that, it was George W. Bush is going to destroy America. And before that, it was Bill Clinton. And I said this was going to destroy America. Said it for a long time. And he would have if it weren't for us. But we're a stronger country than that. We're strong enough to even survive 8 years of Barack Obama. And we've got to start showing that optimism to the American people and being more than just the party of no, which unfortunately Republicans in Washington, D.C., not around the country, but in Washington, D.C., for too long have been defined as a party of no. Yes, ma'am.
Right here. Wait for the microphone if you don't mind.
But don't you think that right now we have the worst electorate ever? These people, most of these people that vote nowadays have no idea about anything that's going on in the country, and if you ask them where any city in the country is located, they don't know that either.
By the way, where are we exactly right now? I get lost too. You know, I went to the University of Alabama. I'm not even good at math. Most years I can only count to number 1. This year we'll probably count to number 2. But let me tell you what Americans do now. I disagree with you, by the way. Let me tell you what Americans do now. They do know whether they're doing better this year than they were doing last year. They do know whether they're going to be able to afford to send their children to college, or whether they're going to have to tell them, sorry, you're going to have to stay home and try to work your way through college on your own. They can figure out, to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, whether they were doing better today than they were 4 years ago, and they can figure out the direction of this country. And they can also figure out what politician and what political party offers them the best hope of improving themselves and of bettering their lives. And by the way, I strongly disagree, again, and I'll say it again, with Mitt Romney's assertion that only 47% of Americans contribute and 53% of Americans take from this country, and that's all they want to do. I disagree with that. You know what? My dad worked around the clock his entire life. In 1972, during the recession, he got laid off from Lockheed. We drove around the Deep South for 18 months for my dad to try to find a job so he could provide for his family. And he eventually got that job, but he worked so hard to get it and to try to get his children to live a better life than he was able to live. And I do think Americans know that. And Americans understand that, and they feel it in their gut, whether you get it or not, and whether your party gets it or not. And like I said, like Thatcher, like Reagan, we've got to reconnect with those middle-class Americans, with those working-class Americans, with those Reagan Democrats that helped us win 49 states in 1972 and 49 states again in 1984.
We have time for one more question. Back in the back there.
Hi, I come from the great liberal state of New York.
New York, all right. Don't go back there. There's a snowstorm coming.
Home of the New York Times.
Yes.
So my question is how do we ever get the media's attention to the positive for Republicans? Because living in New York, I feel like I am the only Republican in New York.
Yeah. Well, there's one other. So.
He's sitting right next to me.
Okay. If one
How
can
do we
con-
do that? How do we get the media to at least report the news?
Well, that's been a challenge for a very long time, hasn't it? It's a challenge that Ronald Reagan faced. It's a challenge that Republican presidential nominees have faced for years. And of course, it used to be a lot more difficult than it is now. Back when the only news sources were ABC, national news sources were ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Certainly the media splintered out more now, but I think most Americans now, even though the major networks, for the most part out of New York, do have a left-of-center bias, I think it's shifted more to the center over the past 20 years, in large part because of Fox News and because of other conservative media outlets that have actually shown that there is an appetite not only for conservative news, but news down the middle. And so I think we're doing better today than we were 25, 30 years ago. I do think, though, there's another challenge for conservatives, and that is to not be like liberals used to be in the 1970s. Remember the famous quote after Richard Nixon won 49 states? I forget who the New Yorker was, New York intellectual, who famously said, "How did Nixon win? I don't know a single person who voted for him." Right? That's because they lived inside a bubble. Do you know what happened to us in 2012? We lived inside our own conservative bubble that we created. We created an alternate media universe that never challenged us, that made us believe going into the election that Mitt Romney was going to win. You could go to whatever website you wanted to go to that would show you that Mitt Romney was up by 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 points. You could turn on whatever news program you wanted to turn on that would tell you if there were a poll that reported something out of Ohio that you didn't like, that it was just because it was made by a biased news organization. You could turn on talk radio shows that for 3 hours over and over again would tell you everything's all right, the media's biased, Mitt Romney's going to win. And so the morning after, we woke up shocked and stunned and deeply saddened that we had been duped. We've got to get outside of our bubble. We really do. I'm more concerned about that. I'm more concerned about Republicans, to be honest with you, now, conservatives living inside this bubble during presidential campaigns and not holding the candidates and their campaigns accountable. Because for those of us that were close to the Romney campaign, we started voicing our concerns in August that things just weren't going the way they should be going. And then you went to the national convention